Knock, knock, guys.
Who's there?
It's Mike Kelly, the Cynical Trainer.
Hey, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us today. How you doing?
I'm not doing too badly. Locked down here in my studio gym for the last 2.5 years, I think.
You've
That's about right.
You've been in the same room for 2.5 years. Have you not been allowed to leave?
I'm very lucky. We have 10-foot ceilings, big. You can't even see all the gym here. It's great. I do one-on-one training from world class to mom and pop here, but obviously for the last 2.5 years it's been hit and miss. And I'm very fortunate. This is kind of my man cave. So
epic. No, it's a really good space, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can appreciate the home gym that Mike's got here. It's a pretty impressive setup. Nice job.
Yeah,
nice job.
It took some time. So happy New Year, guys. By the way, I have a burning question I have to ask, mostly to Gareth, I guess. But
yeah.
Your accents sound cool to the Canadian ear, right? You know that. That's why you all come over here on a boat and you end up living here.
I've been told that.
Accents are so cool. No lie, my GPS voices are either British females or Irish females. I just love the accent. But here's my burning question. If I were to jump the pond and go over to Britain or Ireland, would our Canadian accents sound cool, or would they just sound geeky, crappy?
No, they'd sound cool for sure.
So they do stand out over there. So
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. And it's funny how we've just been back to England, and anyone that listens regularly and is listening now will know we've been away for a bit. And we were back in England, and it's so funny how everyone thinks that we sound Canadian, which was quite entertaining.
Yeah, it was really quite funny. And it was funny for us because we were like, the English accent, it sounds so fake. It sounds like everyone's trying to be Peppa Pig. It was really quite peculiar. So anyways, yeah, accents are cool. I think wherever you go and you're not from there, you always sound cool because it's different. It's intriguing. So there you go.
I hope
my daughter can do a pretty good British accent, but I'm not even going to attempt.
Oh no, when I have to do it.
For the whole show.
This is it. This is all you're going to get.
Perfect.
So,
at best I will sound somewhat American because I did so much business down in the States many decades ago. So we'll leave it at that. This is all you're getting.
Okay, fair dues. So if you are listening, yes, this really is a fitness podcast. We just kind of went off on a weird segue. But that's cool. So Mike, thanks for joining us. And maybe, just maybe, if you're listening, you caught that Mike said, "I'm Mike Kelly, the Cynical Trainer," and I absolutely love that. So I want to know why you're called the Cynical Trainer, and I also want to find out, when we were reading the notes of this podcast, why the one thing you wanted to talk about was why I hate exercise. So why are you the Cynical Trainer, and expand into that comment?
Well, on the former, without cynicism, the world would just be running amok. Cynicism, it has a base of questioning. And if you don't question things, politicians, corporations will just take over. So you have to question things. Now, that being said, I'm not cynical about everything. I love life. By the way, I do exercise, jumping ahead a point, but I'll get to that in a minute. But I am very cynical about a few things. And I think the three things that stand out are government, as it pertains to people, meaning the masses of people that blindly think the government is going to look after them as they start to physically fall apart in life. Probably around their 40s, 50s, certainly into their 60s, a lot of people start to lose functionality. And that's excluding obesity, which is another issue altogether. The government is a basket case. The government can't look after itself. So how can you expect the government to look after you? Let alone the healthcare systems, which are just so overwhelmed. Obviously, COVID has just driven that to craziness. But, there's an old saying, physician, heal thyself. Well, you don't have to be a physician to heal thyself. There's a lot you can do. In fact, in my humble opinion, excluding genetics, systemics, like cancer or something, trauma, neuropathy aspects, those things aside, most dysfunctions that people experience in life are self-induced. They are self-induced. through various things.
Yeah, that's a good
Nutrition,
point, eh?
meaning lack thereof, proper nutrition, chemical aspects, addictions, and so on, etc. Lack of activity. These are self-induced. And I can literally talk for many hours on this, to a point where I've created a course, which if I may, I'll talk about later.
Of course.
But
The
coming back
cynical
to,
course, is that what it's called?
oh yeah, I'll
That would
explain
be
that in a little
epic.
bit. So,
Okay.
but on the second note, I'm also cynical of pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals, from a scientific perspective, start out with the best intentions, but ultimately, money, it's a money business. Money rears its ugly head and can somewhat jade decision processes that go on, literally to a point why have vaccines not been given to the poorest countries in the world to stop the spread of this stuff? Like, it boggles my mind. But again, the money's driven on money. The world is driven on money, and this is the issue. The other thing that I guess makes me cynical are related to health and wellness, is the concept that people believe you can change something you've taken decades to cause to fail, meaning your body, and then expect to correct it by buying some piece of quick gym equipment that is being used by very fit people who, by the way, every fitness model that's ever demoed a brand new piece of fitness equipment has never gotten fit on that piece of equipment. They were already fit. That's why they were hired for that commercial. It's academic.
Yes.
So, but a lot of that equipment that gets bought up at this time of year, you can bet within 3 months if people are going to be hanging clothes on it. It's not going to be used. And I could get into a long discussion as to why that is. But the reality is, the human brain wants instant gratification. Period. Secondly, this is going to be painful to a lot of people to swallow. Every human on the planet is selfish. That's an inherent built-in aspect of the human psyche. We're selfish from a survival aspect. Now, you can be altruistic and help people, but you're doing that because it makes you feel good. The brain wants you to do things to make you feel good. Let me jump ahead a bit. You don't feel good by immediately doing exercise. That's point number one. Keep that in mind. I'll come back to it.
All right.
Okay? So, but people who have caused themselves through, ignorance, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean just a lack of knowledge. That's what ignorance is. But through ignorance, people have let themselves slowly decline. And one of the problems of the human body is that it is extremely tolerant in its youthful state. If you take the peak human body, a male at 21 or female at 18, it can take all kinds of abuse and completely survive it in that moment. Somewhere in the world, maybe in an old Eastern Bloc country, there is an alcoholic, chain-smoking, drug-addicted, Olympic-level class athlete who's like 20, 21. What's the problem with that? Well, you take that same behavioral aspect into latter life when the aging body can't deal with it as well, from an endocrine system, like hormonal perspective and so on, and the body starts to pay the price. And by that time, the behaviors, meaning the human body, the human makeup, we are very, very repeatable in our behaviors. Thus, it's very predictable. The reality is that these behaviors we create from early childhood, we take them forth, and if they aren't good behaviors, you're screwed. And so what's the end result? We've got hundreds of millions of people just in North America who are considered obese or worse. What? This is craziness, right? So the reality is that when you try to fix something that took you decades to fail and try to correct it in 2 weeks via dieting or some, I will quote unquote, package with a CD to burn your calories off super quick and so on, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's all based on brain chemistry. And if I may, I'll very quickly say this. I've been in sports and fitness for 47 years, okay? Like a long time. And the reality is, I'd like to think that I'm relatively knowledgeable about the human body from an anatomical and a movement perspective, proper movement, challenging it, keeping it healthy. I'm a senior citizen myself. My goal role model is Jack LaLanne. The guy died at 96. He was still doing his workout the day before. That's a good role model to have from a fitness perspective. Now, the reality is that after all those years in fitness, training a lot of people, I've been strength and conditioning coach at university levels, and I've been a kind of athlete myself, varsity level, doing all this stuff, training people. While they're training with me, they're doing well and they're learning. But it's a very small window of opportunity I have to glean on them the knowledge that I want them to get. And in a lot of cases, when they stop the training with me, maybe 6 months later, they fall off. Why? Because it's not what they do for a living. Yeah. They fall back to their behaviorisms that they had before. So it took me a long time, probably maybe 15 years ago, where I first started thinking, there's something missing here. Like I can tell you where the origin and insertion points are and the angles of movement and so on, et cetera, but what's driving all that? And what's driving it is brain chemistry. So I wanted to go back to school for like nearly a decade and a half, and it took me 10 years to finally get up the gumption to go. So I went back to Queen's University 5 years ago and jumped forward spring April 2020. I was Queen's oldest psychology graduate. And
congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
If I had to take, when I look at a personal trainer, I think, Nicky, you know that one of the jobs I do is as a pro trainer for Canfit Pro is I train personal trainers. So I've trained and certified over 1,000 people over the 16, 17 years I've been doing that. The best trainers to me are the ones that are older. Why? Because they've lived through life experiences. They understand what arthritis is. Like, this is no lie. In the morning, okay, I'm not boasting, I'm kind of trying here, but in the morning, I can't close my hands tightly, okay? So what does that mean? Well, I can either succumb to that and let it take over to where I'll become dysfunctional and disfigured, or I can say, listen, I've got 27 muscles here. What can I do to make these functional so it will overcome the osteoarthritis that is there and is not going away, and there's no cure for that? So at the end of the day, I don't know if your people will see this in video, but if I take my two fists down here, don't do this on TV, guys.
Here he goes. Just for purpose of podcast, Mike was doing plyometric push-ups on his knuckles. Epic.
So if you haven't trained for that, you're going to break your hand or your wrist. Okay. But the point being, if you have the proper resources and patience, I mean, it takes a long time to train up for this.
Sure.
But if you have the proper time and resources, you can challenge the body in a safe way that it will overcome other obstacles that are already inherent, systemically or behavioral based, that you brought in. So my goal on this planet, other than looking after my family and our dogs, is to embellish enough to get people interested to want to know that you can be your own change. But from the psychological aspect, here's the catch. Let's say, for example, you have an opinion that is extremely strong. It's probably a bias, which I get into in this course that I created quite in-depthly. But let's say, for example, you were a staunch supporter of a certain government. We won't say what party. And your parents voted for that party, and their parents' parents voted for that party, and so on. It's just ingrained. That party can be the worst party on the planet. They can be hypocritical, not do what they say they'll do. They can be wasteful of our tax money. They can be criminal, okay? And short of doing genocide, you will always vote for them because of the biases built in. Now, the only thing that can change that is context. So I'm jumping into my second point here. I do hate exercise. So let me ask you guys, do you love a good sleep?
Oh, yeah. I love sleeping.
Given the opportunity, would you ever turn down, as long as there were no negative ramifications, would you ever turn down the opportunity to have a good sleep?
Oh,
nope.
Never. Going to bed early is like the best thing ever.
Best thing, you know, next to water, it's the next best thing the human body can do, is to have, if you can do it, is to have a good sleep. Okay. And in that order, that's what I do in life to, again, hopefully keep functioning. Now, that being said, when people try to make a change the brain takes over from an immediacy aspect. It wants instant gratification. So let me ask you this question. Do you love doing exercise?
No.
Be sincere, be sincere.
No, no. I think in the moment, sometimes it's a no. I think sometimes the thought of it, especially like the commitment, because there's all other stuff that comes with it, right?
Yep.
So sometimes the answer no is no.
And I'm the interesting opposite of that, where I do really enjoy it. So I'm totally of a different, I don't know, mindset, I guess, approach.
Okay. It's possible that I may actually change your mind by the end of this podcast, but maybe not, because I need context to give to you, a cognizant individual, to reason out as to whether or not what this guy is rambling and ranting about makes sense to you, to cause you to make a change. I mean, I'm not going to change you. All I can do is give you context and information to let you make an informed decision. Okay. Here's another thought, though, to jump into this without getting too much into the brain chemistry aspect. Have you guys heard that flossing your teeth from a dental health perspective is a good thing to do?
Yeah, sure.
Have you heard, do you realize that we need to floss, as far as the dental associations are concerned, within 24 to 48 hours maximum? Otherwise, plaque will turn into tartar, calcicum, which basically a dentist has to professionally take off. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
If the tartar stays there and builds up, it will actually lead to health issues such as gingivitis, heaven forbid, periodontal disease, surgeries, blood sepsis, the whole thing. Scary as hell. So here's my question. In the last 20 years, have you ever missed a day of flossing your teeth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, not to sound anal, but I have not. It is that inherent in me. Okay, I have special tools that I've used over the years to cause me to do this. By the way, it's benefiting me that I don't have a dental plan, so I'm somewhat incentivized to do that. Here's the deal. Why did you miss? You know it's important. You know it's healthy. Why did you miss?
It's boring.
It's boring. I'm
tired. And quite clearly, other things are more important.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why you didn't do it. It's not fun. The brain wants instant gratification from the meaning. That's at the highest peak. The brain wants instant gratification. Okay. It wants other things, but that's its main motive next to reserving calories. Okay. So because you don't get like pleasure, and by the way, there's always exceptions in the world, and the exceptions start to fall into the category of disorders. So we're not going to go there in this discussion. But the reality is that because flossing your teeth is not fun, it's not fun. Your brain will take opportunities, they're called heuristics or shortcuts, to justify not doing it. Okay, even though you know that it's not good to skip it, right? It's the same thing with exercise. Okay, I do hate exercise. Why? Because I understand what it is. I also understand that I need to do exercise. Okay, I don't like getting a vaccine, but I know I need to get it. Okay, I don't want to get into the discussion of whether you should or shouldn't. Everyone should have their own rights to do things. But from the exercise perspective, it's the same thing. I hate doing exercise, but I do it. And I probably do more than most people because it's my lifestyle. It's what I do. And by the way, I love playing sports, all types of sports, some at relatively decent levels, other I'm a hack, but I love playing sports. So if I want to play the sports, I have to do the exercise. I also love eating. I love eating.
Me too.
I eat probably close to 4,200 calories a day. And yet I've been I can put on weight. I could be obese, okay? I'm not a mesomorph. I'm probably between a mesomorph and an endomorph, okay, for body type. So I can put on weight, just like my mom did. And my part of my family does, okay? Some of my family members are overweight. But the reality is that people cycle through. So a lot of my family members, they'll cycle through their body type positions. I've been lucky. I've been 190 pounds for as long as I can remember, certainly for the last 25 years. And in order to maintain that, you have to do the exercise as part of the nutrition. So it's like the flossing. I don't like flossing. I hate flossing. My God, my brain always tries to come up with an excuse. Mike, you know what? Because you're doing the podcast right now, late, you don't have to do the flossing tonight. Yes, you do.
I'm loving this analogy, by the way. It's epic.
Well, that's not an analogy I share in the course, because jumping ahead, again, you need context. What I've created is a course. It runs over 2 days, a Tuesday and a Thursday. And this particular course is kind of a nuts and bolts picture of what psychology is, as far as it pertains to exercise and the brain. And in that course, I break things down systematically from a challenge perspective as to what challenges the human body has to endure in order to stay functionally fit and healthy. And trust me, it looks like this.
Mm.
And it's slippery. Okay. I mean, you can start making headway and fall back. So 2.5 weeks ago, I haven't played. I used to play varsity tennis. I taught tennis many decades ago, and I love tennis, but I haven't played for 3 years, literally. This summer I went out and I played once with a local club pro that I've known for decades. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. I felt pretty good. So anyways, long story short, I was invited to play doubles with 3 local pros here in Ottawa 2.5 weeks ago. Halfway into the match, I ran down a lob, got the thing back, won the point, and I hyperextended my knee. Grade one, those 3 tears, 3 levels. Now that's normally like a 4 to 6 week thing. I'm fortunate. So 2 weeks in, I'm getting there. It's not 100%, but it's getting there. If I hadn't have done all the exercise that I hate from a consistent basis, that would have probably been a lot longer recovery period.
Oh, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to be living under a rock to have not realized that exercise is beneficial. You have to do it. Well, newsflash, a lot of people don't do it. Well, why don't they do it? So, it's a bit of a paradigm shift, and that's sort of what I'm trying to put forth in this course, is to make people in the health and fitness profession understand why it's so challenging. If you have a problem, there's actually a systematic psychological, there's a 4 to 5 step, depending on whose methodologies you look at. But even before going into, say, for example, the denial stage, you actually have to recognize there's a problem. And then you get into the denial aspect and biases and so on. But if you can't recognize the problem, you cannot then try to give context. I made the mistake a long time ago, many times, trying to pass on my passion for staying fit and healthy to people randomly, on a bus seat, on a train seat, on an airplane seat. I mean, if you want to break up a conversation with someone, just tell them that you're in health and fitness. People always want to talk to you because they're looking for shortcuts.
Aren't they all? Yeah.
Lips. There are no shortcuts, period. Not from a sustainable perspective.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a multitude, an endless, infinite amount of shortcuts if you don't care about the sustainability aspect. And people don't, because the brain doesn't care about that.
Well, you spoke about that earlier, Mike, right? You were on about, you go through years and years of, I think you called it fail, right? Like just bad habitual cycles, whether, they be food or nutrition or exercise. And then you're right, you try and fix it in 2 weeks and then you just fall backwards. So I think, we have to be mindful of that when we're setting our own personal goals, but as fitness professionals, when we're talking to our clients and individuals, it takes a long time to break a habit, to break a cycle. So, if anything, it probably, and you'll probably know more about this than me, it probably takes just as long to break as it does to create it.
No.
Oh, okay.
It's worse than that.
Oh, crap. I was hoping you'd say it was shorter.
No, it's worse.
No shortcut.
There is a sidebar to that, but I don't want to get into it because I'd have to give a lot of context to explain it. So, part of this concept of context, it doesn't matter what you're trying to instill in somebody to get them to understand something, the context has to be something that they can actually understand. So if I literally just started speaking about the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual version 5 of psychologists and so on, and on all of the disorders and so on, et cetera, it would just shoot right over your head, right? Because the context is not, it's not palatable for you in most people's cases. So it's got to be filtered down so the person is going to understand it. Then they can reason with it. Then they can make decisions with it. That Mike Kelly is full of hot air, or, oh my God, he said something. He gave me an analogy, like the flossing, for example. It really resonated with me. It really resonated. I'm going to take a look into that. And that's the opportunity where people can then start to change their direction as to how they're going to deal with things. You know, when people come to train with me, I don't take clients, because I'm not training people for the money. Money's nice, but if I don't enjoy what I'm doing, I don't want to train you. Right? Now, athletes are a different animal. Okay, so I'm talking mostly about the masses, the general mom and pops of the world, which are the biggest problems, and they've negatively hit our healthcare system, and it's only going to get worse. Okay, but the reality is, from an athletic perspective, it's a money drive. Money is the big motivator, meaning they're being driven to, when they get injured, they've got to get back on the gridiron really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sadly, a lot of them go back, you know, without getting too much in the anatomy. A lot of trainers will train people, and when they look good, when they can push the same amount of weight, you know, ballistically move the same way in the gym, they're ready to go back on the rink or the gridiron or whatnot. No, especially if you've got down to the periosteum, like bone bruising. Like that goes away in like 6 to 12 months. But people, the bruising is gone, the palpitation pain is gone, so they figure they're ready to go. Well, you're not, because when you put in the real world torquing in that, that's when things start to fall apart. And that's why a lot of athletes go back too soon, because it's a money. You got to, come on, get back on the game here, okay? They're being driven to do that. And then they push themselves too hard, and their injuries, they just exacerbate and they get worse. And then they're done. Their knees are blowing out or whatnot. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good.
And by the way, very competitive people are relatively stupid when it comes to pushing themselves. So when I talked about my tennis 2.5 weeks ago, I did my hams. Okay, I did that hyperextension halfway through. So, and by the way, one of the players is also he's in charge of certification around Eastern Ontario for new tennis pros. He's also a physiotherapist. He owns his own physiotherapy clinic. He's actually going to be taking my course in 2 weeks. But he noticed me limping and didn't say anything. That limp got progressively worse through the rest half of the match. That next morning, I couldn't walk. I was using a cane for like a good week, right? But that was just competitive stupidity. You know.
Yeah.
My apologies to my wife.
And you should know better.
Oh, sure,
The
exactly.
worst. Yes,
Exactly.
yes, it's so true.
Yeah, you said something really interesting that I just want to go back to, because it's fascinating to me. And there's a lot of, you know, fit pros that listen from a coaching standpoint. And there's two things I think are so important, that you need to give people context, or I think what you actually said was give it to them in a way they understand it. And I think this is where we fall down as an industry from a coaching standpoint, is that we don't do our best effort of making people understand why things are important. Because as you said, some things aren't fun. Sometimes at 6:30 in the morning, when I've got people doing, you know, our members logged on for workouts doing burpees or mountain climbers, or they're doing, you know, the 5th set of strength, you know, goblet squats, and they're struggling to get out the bottom of it, is they need to understand why they're doing it. And I think we as an industry, and we spoke about this recently on an episode with Nathalie Lacombe as well, is I think the industry talks to the get fit, lose weight, you know, that mentality, the body image stuff that I think is just doesn't give people a reason to do it. And I think we could do a better job of talking to why it's important, the longevity. We're doing this for, you know, for you to be able to continue through life and age, and, you know, and making sure that when we are doing those things, that we're doing them in the way that's going to allow that. And I just wanted to get your kind of views on that, because I think we miss that as an industry. And I'd love to hear kind of the psychological, and basically, if that makes sense.
Had you ever heard of a play, Death of a Salesman? The book, Death of a Salesman?
No, I don't think I have, but I'm going to write it down.
Arthur Miller. Anyways, the main character, he's actually dead. His name is Ben Duffy. He's a salesman. He's dead, but we're hearing his voice and so on throughout the play and the book. He was really successful as a salesman, and one of the reasons he was successful is because every time he'd go into a sales call, just before doing that, he would sit down with himself and talk to himself. What questions is that person going to ask me? I'm going to try to ask the questions to myself that I think they would ask me. So he would be prepping for that. And it's called, actually in the sales world, it's called doing a Ben Duffy, the name of the character. You try to put yourself in the client's position. From a fitness perspective, this is why I said older trainers tend to be, there's exceptions, but tend to be better off from a personal trainer perspective than younger ones. That's because the older ones have experienced life more. I'll give you an example. So you're probably both familiar with the fact that if I say, listen, stretch my quadricep with a standing quadricep stretch. So that's how we'll do it. Number one, go the opposite leg hand. That way you'll pull in straight. It's a sagittal line movement for the striated muscles there in the quadricep. So you want to keep it tight. You don't want to take that hand and flare it up like a lot of people do. Now, imagine, if you will, that your client is 350 pounds, 55 years of age, and sedentary for the last 15 years. Do you really think that that person, 350 pounds, is going to be able to do this, holding on or not? There's no way they can even reach their foot, right? So, but I have seen, and when I teach my PTS for CanFit Pro, I try and take every activity we do and then ask the students, how would a 350-pound, because that's a real audience, right? Like that's into the obesity, quasi-morbid obesity aspect. How would they be able to do that? Well, they can't. They've got to get down on the floor, and you've got to grab their foot, and you've got to gently move it up or get a strap or something like a belt to allow them to grab onto their foot to pull the foot into knee flexion on the floor. Okay, so that's an example of providing context to someone about a concept that otherwise would be very foreign to them. Well, why can't they grab their foot? I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I vividly remember, I trained a client for about 6 months, decades ago. He was morbidly obese. And I remember the day that he broke down into tears because it was the first time in 20 or 30 years that he was able to reach his foot to tie his shoelace.
Wow.
Like, wow. So that is that reality reset that people need to go through. And I admit, when I was young and stupider, does such a word exist, stupider?
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Great word.
Okay. I was a waiter and a bartender putting myself through school. And after the shift here in Ottawa, I would get together with other members of that bar, and we'd go out for a nightcap over to Huller's in Quebec. The bars were open later. And if we ever saw somebody that was different than us, meaning overweight, male or female, we would make snide remarks to them, behind their backs, of course. Now when I see somebody for the last 3-4 decades, now when I see somebody that has already started down the path of excess weight, which I will talk about in a minute if I may, when they've got excess weight going on and it's started to affect them. And what I mean by that is, we're forward walking bipeds, humans, right? We walk in a sagittal movement. Well, when I see people start to walk like this, I call it the waddle.
Oh, the side to side.
The side to side sway.
Yeah, they've
pregnant
already,
woman walk. That's what I call that. Sorry.
They've already started. And trust me, it's going to get worse. When I see that, it hurts me because number one, I know what's in store for them. It's not good. Okay. And I've got many stories I can speak to about that experiential wise. It's just sad, but it's almost self-destruction because they lack the knowledge, the resource, and the context to make good life decisions. Well, here's a news flash, guys, and I don't want to burst your bubble, but your audience you're speaking to, there's a really good chance the majority of them are not morbidly obese. The majority of your audience, correct me if I'm wrong, are probably health/fit minded or in the fit health world. That's why they're listening to your podcast to pick up whatever nuances they can.
Yeah.
Well, that's not who we need to reach. So by extension, those people at least hopefully will get out and talk to those people that are never going to set foot in a gym. You know, we're in the fitness world, we are in such a microcosm of society. You go into a large gym, and I won't mention any brand names. I've trained trainers at pretty well all of them. When you go into a large gym, you think, oh my God, this place is jam-packed today. There's 5,000 members here, and I think they're all here today. There's 1 million people in Ottawa. And we're talking about maybe a gym. And let's say there's 20 gyms that day that have 5,000 people in them. It's a microcosm. Right?
So I have a question for you, Mike. So now the fitness industry has, well, had no choice really but to explode even more on the virtual platform. Do you think that we are now actually reaching those people that perhaps were intimidated to step into a gym? Do you think fitness has actually somehow become a bit more accessible?
You know, you need, from a psychological aspect, people need to come out of their comfort zone, which is difficult to do. You know, when you're in a gym pre-COVID, you never want to let the weight stack hit the stack because it makes noise and that attracts attention. People don't want that. You know, they want to be off in a corner. That's why studio gyms have a good time. But those that are there will continue to do stuff at some point, either on their own or when the gyms open up again, or when they're with both. Those that never go into a gym, in my opinion, are they doing more stuff now virtual? Probably some infinitesimal amount. Because sadly, what's also happened, things like depression have gone through the roof. We're literally, like, we're in Ontario. You're in Ontario, right? I think you're still in Ontario.
Yes.
We're locked down. We're locked down, pretty much. You know, my God, it's potentially depressing unless you've got outlets. That, by the way, is a big part that I deal with in the course, and that is coping mechanisms. The difference between an individual that gets through life relatively unscathed from an observational perspective compared to others, and to someone who has completely fallen apart and gone to the wayside, addictions, obesity, depression, are coping mechanisms. The good news is, again, given context, it's got to be understandable by them, context and resources, you can develop coping mechanisms. They aren't a quick fix, though. Nothing is a quick fix. So that's part of the context. If it annoys me sometimes when I see trainers come out with the whip. Come on, do this, you know, push yourself. HITT, HIT until. No, it doesn't work that way. Not from a sustainable. They may do it while they're with you, but they're not going to do it when you're not there, because the brain doesn't like doing that. So if I may very quickly, I'll jump into this. So Nicky, as you may be aware, I started from the global conference at Canfit Pro last summer. I was very happy with the delivery of that, but I wanted to reach a lot more people. So I thought, wow, you know, I went back to school. I don't want to give them years worth of information, but I think I could put together a course in a packaged perspective that's easily understood with tools, action items that you can actually implement for yourself and your clients. I can do that in 2 days. So 250 hours later, I wrote this course. It rolled out in December, really well received and so on. And it's continuing to roll out. And the course splits over 2 days, but it starts from start to finish, showing you what's going on, meaning identifying the problem, and then elements that you can do to deal with it from a brain perspective. So it's not just me rambling off anecdotally. You know, there's two general kinds of information. My late mom's hairdresser said, if I stand on my head, I'll promote hair growth. It's anecdotal. I've tried it. It doesn't work. And then there's science-based, double-blind studies, peer-reviewed. That stuff is pretty good. It's not infallible, but it's pretty good. And that's the focus that I take within the course, but in an understandable format. So it fits well for physiotherapists, for doctors, anybody that's dealing with clients from a health and or fitness perspective, chiropractors, trainers, osteopaths, you name it, okay? And I love teaching this stuff because at the end of it, I asked them a similar question that I asked you at the start of this interview, and it's cool to see what their new answers are.
Yeah.
Just after that. And they then have tools that they can use themselves, because I truly believe that if you're in the health and fitness field, if you're able to, if there's no systemic, genetic, or trauma-based issues stopping you, you should walk the talk as best you can. Now, I mentioned earlier about excess weight. I don't care if you've got excess weight. When I was a strength and conditioning coach at Ottawa U, it was for the women's hockey team at that time for a couple of years. And they were so bent on weight. You know, young females, very fit from a hockey perspective, but they weren't as functionally fit as they could be. And they were terrified of getting on the weight scale. We actually had to have certain areas so no one else could potentially see what their weight was. It was secretive. It was like a secretive society. I put their minds to rest right at the start. I said, ladies, I don't care how much you weigh. I really don't. But here's what I want. I want you to have a body fat level that is going to not restrict you in what your position in that ice position game is going to be. Okay, so if you're a defenseman, you can have a little more and still be functional for your job. If you're a center, you've got to be fleet of foot. So body fat is a much more relevant. I use ultrasound here in my gym, and ultrasound gives you a very repeatable and thus predictable from that perspective of what you're going to be doing with a health perspective, functionality wise. But who cares if I don't have a six-pack? I've got a 5 3/4 back, by the way.
I have one.
Yeah, one pack.
My 5 3/4 pack allows me. You know, I used to own a dojo. I took martial arts. I still practice and teach it a bit. I can take a hard gut punch anytime because that's how I've trained, and I won't get the wind knocked out of me because our lungs go quite deep under our rectus abdominis and so on. But I don't have a full six-pack. Why? Because I do not have the interest of being in the gym, regardless if I live here or not, 6 days a week and cutting on my nutrition. Like, who wants to be hangry? The brain sure doesn't.
No.
Okay. I spent a lot of time in the course talking about diets. It's a sad reality out there. I'm not going to put you guys in a pigeonhole, but I think you know what kind of questions I would ask.
Mm-hmm.
But I bring them forth in the course to let people see where things are going with the clients they're working with, because we obviously know diet. Very, very quickly, guys, you're too young for this, okay? But in the 50s, the word diet meant something like, in your northern indigenous cultures, your diet was seal. If you were an Asian culture, your diet was fish. If you ask a 20 or 30 something on the street today what a diet is, well, they'll say, well, let's see, last week it was paleo. I think next week I'm going to try Atkins. Let's see, there's a grapefruit diet. Well, let's see, there's the Weight Watchers. That's not what a diet is. That's an interim fix, which does not work from this perspective, from a sustainable. So you want to take the knowledge, you want to add the time, and you want to become repeatable to build up a sustainable functionality. I'm never going to have a six-pack, and I don't care.
Yeah.
Because six packs are not, they're not sustainable. Not for the average person. Okay? Take a look at any bodybuilder from 30 years ago and now. The majority of them they look like a mess. This is not, there's a rare, there's an occasional one, but it's extremely hard. And this doesn't like doing that.
So
by the way, for those on the audio, I'm pointing to my brain. Okay?
But yeah, I was gonna say, I love how animated you are. It's brilliant. So this is all fascinating. And I know there are so many people listening that are like, okay, this course, you sold me, let's do this. So Mike, like, what would be the next steps for somebody who is interested in your course? Can they head to your website? Like, what's the best way to kind of set the wheels in motion to get registered?
The next course runs January 25th, and then it finishes on the 27th. So it's Tuesday and Thursday. Runs from 3:30 till like 8 p.m. And you can register. It's $199 plus HST. You can register through my website, which is wemeanfitness.com. That sounds like we mean business. We really mean business. No, it's wemeanfitness.com. Or they can use the phrase knock knock. Spelling doesn't count.
Yep.
A direct email to M Kelly, that's MKELLY at wemeanfitness.com. If you put in that knock knock, I'll knock 20% off of that price for you up until January 20th.
That's really nice. Thanks, Mike. Our listeners will appreciate that. And we'll also put all of your information in the show notes as well. So don't panic if you are listening in the car and you're like, I missed that. Don't worry. We'll write it down for you.
I got it.
So I think I started out by saying at the start of this, gee, I'm not sure what I'll talk about in this thing, but as you probably learned right now, I can ramble for hours.
Yeah, you're pretty good
what
at
I'd
that.
like to leave you with is that I'm a minimalist. From an exercise perspective, I'm a minimalist. There's no fairness in life. Those that are relatively fit, so we're up here on this fit scale, they get to stay fit easier than those that are trying to climb the hill to get fit. And very often function and fail and so on. Those that are already fit and kind of learned it, they have their ups and downs, but they get to stay fit easier and enjoy life from a functionality perspective easier than those that are trying to get fit. I want to leave people with a concept that's very simple. If given the proper amount of time, which means patience, and the right resources done in a progressive way, you can change virtually any human body makeup from a body composition and functionality. But you need those two. Anybody that says, here's a get fit quick scheme, run. Run. You normally see them in the early hour. You normally see them in the early morning hours, 2 a.m. or something, whereby if you buy this pill, okay,
go to the
you will
Matrix.
shed weight. And then if you can read the microscopic print on the bottom of the libel staff on their commercial, it'll say, typical user loses 1 to 2 pounds every 3 or 4 weeks. Well, you can do that anyway.
I was going to say, just have a poo.
But
Come
people are in their weakest moments.
Yeah.
When they've hit rock bottom times, they've tried many diets. I can't remember most people that I talk to that I think are overweight. When I ask them how many diets have you been on, they don't know how many diets they've been on. They don't understand what the brain is doing from a diet perspective, and that's why they continue to do it, looking for the quick fix. But once you understand it more, you realize that you're really wasting your time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't be on a diet, but the diet you should be on is the diet you stay on the rest of your life. If you can do that, like I mentioned a few names, so I won't pick one out specifically here, but if you can find a quote unquote diet that most people use from an intra perspective, and once they're off it, they go back to their own lifestyle. But if you can find a diet that you can stay on and endure it and put up with the hangriness aspects, knock yourself out. But there's very few people that can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say your course, Mike, is also for average Joe as well as fitness professionals? Because there's going to be our members and consumers listening as well who are like, yeah, that's me.
We all have a brain, and that brain,
most of us.
Listen, I used to think, I won't get into the philosophical aspects, but I used to think that it was my mind that was driving my body throughout life. It's not. There's some aspects to that. But much of what happens to the body happens without us even realizing it when it's going on from a subconscious. Even when I'm conscious, there are subconscious things going on. There are hardwiring things literally going on that are driving me in doing things. And if you don't get that, you're doomed to fail. Now you don't have to, I will show you things just to show you how cool and the science is real. Like I'll show you what a PET scan is and so on. But how do we know this? Well, this is because the science showed it, okay? But that's as far as we go. But when you get into the neurological aspect, it is so, I teach a course called fascia. Well, I think you know that also, Nikki.
Yeah.
Fascia is so cool. I love fascia because we know virtually nothing about it. It's much cooler than, lifting weights and all that stuff. When you look into fascia is cool. By the way, on my site, if anybody's interested, you can see my next scheduled courses for the CanFit Pro Personal Trainer Specialist certification and the fascia. I love fascia because this stuff is so cool. Well, trust me, psychology, understanding how it relates to the functionality aspect, exercise and so on, diet, it's so much cooler.
Love it. It sounds you've sold me. I think I might just come and join you. So for that course, so hopefully some of the listeners will join too. And so much great information today. We really appreciate you sharing little samples of stuff that people are going to experience. I know a lot of people will get a lot from it. So if you are listening and you got a lot from the show, make sure you check out the course if you're interested. Make sure you go give Mike a follow, give him some love online, and make sure you let him know that you listen to the show. And as always, share it with people you love and care about. We really appreciate that. Mike, thank you so much. Any last thoughts before we sign off the show tonight?
3 things. Thank you for letting me ramble.
Pleasure.
The thing I'm most passionate about. Okay.
And
I must say I have a selfish ulterior motive. And that, because I told you humans are selfish. But that selfish ulterior motive is that if we don't get a handle on the lack of health effectiveness going on from an individual perspective, the economies are going to be decimated. We cannot become such a socialistic world where you're expecting people to look after you. You have to look after yourself.
Yep.
And the tools are there. The problem is there's so much information out there on the internet and so on. It's overwhelming to people. Where do I start? Well, contact a professional in whatever field that you think need the help in to get things whittled down so you can make it palatable and understand it and take it in little pieces. Don't take the whole thing on. You're just going to get overwhelmed and fail. You're doomed to fail.
Yeah.
Humans don't plan to fail. They fail to plan. Yeah. It's that simple. Okay. Number 2, Happy New Year, guys. I forgot to say it at the start of this thing. And number 3, thank you very much for the opportunity of allowing me to ramble. And I'd be happy to answer questions from people if they want to fire me one. I told you about the discount. Knock, knock. 20% off. Okay.
Yeah, we will put all that in the show notes for everyone listening. We'll put your contact details in there, your social media, Mike, so everyone will be able to get in contact with you. And yeah, last thing to say is we appreciate you listening, supporting the show. We're excited to bring you more and more amazing episodes in 2022. So keep tuning in, keep sharing, keep leaving those reviews if you love what we're doing. Nikki, any last thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Mike. Your passion comes through about this subject, and I know we could talk even longer for it about it, and maybe we will, right? So maybe there's a round 2, 3, 4, or 27. So if you want to hear from Mike, more from Mike, then absolutely let us know. But hey, Mike, keep doing what you're doing, educating others and influencing others. You're making a big impact. So thank you for everything you do.
One at a time.
All right. Until next time. Thanks for joining us today, everyone.